Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm so excited. We'll get started here in just a second. I want to give people just a few minutes to go ahead and get online. While you're doing this, I will go ahead and just give a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording today, so you will have access to this recording. And most of the value is going to be digging the materials out of my friend Roshan's head here. But we do have some slides and some data that I think you'll find interesting as well. So we'll make sure that you have access to that slide deck as well on that. We're aiming for about 45 minutes of content. We have three major sections I'll go through in a minute. But if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A tab. You can also put those into the chat. We'll be monitoring both of those as we go through there, and I'll make sure that we get to any of those questions. If you have questions at the end, you can hit them at the end as well. But we will leave some time in each of these segments. So without further ado, I'm actually going to share the PowerPoint screen here. You can connect with Roshan or myself on LinkedIn. We have a QR code there that's showing on that side as well. Let's go ahead and get everything started. Roshan Shakuri is the general manager of AI platform called Flowcast. It's a cloud-based accounting transformation platform built to automate time-intensive, high-flow or high-risk workflows. In his role, Roshan spearheads the integration of advanced ethical AI solutions designed specifically to streamline the accounting workflows. He has extensive technical and private equity experience, and I'm really thrilled to have him join us today. So, Roshan, I'm going to start and have you, use your expertise, your experience, crystal ball. How do you think 5 years from now we're looking at how AI has impacted the accounting industry and specifically maybe accounting firms and how they deliver work?
I appreciate that introduction. Super nice introduction. And I also love this QR code for the Connect with Roshan on LinkedIn. We're
It
going to use
looks
that in
like
the
a
future.
fourth grader made it. It looks like a fourth
Yeah.
grader made it, and it's the Google or it's the Chrome one that automatically builds them.
Yeah, no, it's a good. The 5-year crystal ball question is a loaded question, man. It's a tough question to answer. I have a hot take and a more conservative take. But I think anecdotally, I was listening to a podcast maybe a couple years ago when LLMs first were coming out, and Chamath Palihapitiya in the All In podcast was saying that accounting is probably going to be the first industry to get fully automated by AI.
Yeah.
Seems like that's like the outside looking in approach for people that don't understand accounting, but for those of us that do, it's extremely complex. It's thousands of bespoke journal entries that have to get done through all sorts of data manipulation and reconciliations and workflows and roll forwards, and that has to be documented, it has to be auditable. And so the 5-year thing is tough, right? Like especially accounting as an industry and as a function, it's super regulated. Like I said, things have to be auditable. You're dealing with finance data, accounting data. It has to be secure in terms of like certifications or ISO and that sort of thing. So I think there's going to be some good content throughout this presentation that can allow some folks to build their own hypotheses. But I think the theme is that we have to be deploying AI soon, but we have to be doing it in a responsible way as accountants.
Yeah, and part of the direction that we wanted to take this was recognizing that some of the benefit and the opportunity here is around the talent gap that actually exists in the accounting industry. So we're going to talk a little bit about the talent side of it. We're going to talk a little bit about AI and the impact on client experience. And then I knew that this audience was going to really want to leverage the time with you to kind of understand, hey, somebody that's maybe a little bit more advanced than I am, how are they utilizing some of these AI tools in their day to day, right? Because that's one of the biggest things I think we're all trying to keep up with as well is there's some massive opportunities to improve what we're doing, to make it more efficient, to allow us to get more work done. And that's changing on a daily basis. So I'm really excited to kind of hear some of the ways that you're seeing people, maybe some of the ways even that you've used these AI tools and in your personal day-to-day life.
Yep.
So
Sounds good.
we're going to start with this, and I like to call this, kind of our stat for stat. I'll start with a statistic that stood out with me, and then we pulled some that really kind of resonated with you as well. And we'll kind of overview what is happening with talent in the accounting space. The first one that I wanted to share with you was just the expected job growth and the number of annual job openings. So if you look on the left side of that to start with, what you're seeing is that expected job growth of about 6%. The average is about 4%, right? So we're seeing even larger projected growth in financial managers, management analysts, but accountants and auditors at about 6% growth is about 50% faster than the typical 4% growth. And you can see, outpacing things like lawyers, budget analysts, paralegals, legal assistants, things along those lines. But what's even more impactful, I think, is that on average, annual job openings is about, just a little bit under 20,000 a year. And you can see on the
Hmm.
accountants and auditors side, 131,000. So what we're
Yeah.
seeing there is, expected growth and a whole bunch of churn, right?
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
This is interesting. I think the 6%, like for example, at Flowcast, when I started working at Flowcast, we were sub 5 million in revenue. We had like, 3, 4 accountants. It feels like we still have 3, 4 accountants, but we're now approaching 200 million in revenue. So
Yeah.
I don't know if this is accounting for like expected efficiency as well from an accountant auditor perspective. But yeah, I think this is just a perfect picture around this talent gap and AI being served on a platter at the right time to help fix the gap. But these are crazy numbers.
Well, and I think your stat kind of plays to part of the reason why we see, a little bit faster expected growth, but dramatically faster, larger number of job openings, which is the retiring rate. So talk a little bit about that and why that's important.
Yeah, so there's a number on AI CPA around 75% of CPAs and accountants retiring in the next 10 to 15 years. That's a huge number, right?
Yeah.
Like 70,000 accountants retiring annually is insane. And that's a big crisis, right? Because it's not just the number, but under the hood, there's so much institutional tribal type of knowledge that'll be lost in terms of how accountants are doing specific processes within their specific companies. Um, Story time, like I was 6 months ago or so, I was working out of my dad's office in San Jose. He started a company 20 years ago, bootstrapped, outsourced his accounting team to India, outsourced all the engineers to India. His CFO is 75 or 80 years old now. And I'm sitting there in a meeting like this, and I look up to the right, and there's a shelf full of like 50 binders, just like tie out binders. And so that's like so much tribal knowledge that's going to be lost when he retires and that accounting team is gone, for example.
Yeah.
There's a couple different huge paradigm shifts in accounting, just like pivot a little bit. But Excel was introduced in the 80s and 90s. That fundamentally changed how accountants did their job. The cloud was introduced in the 2000s. That fundamentally changed how accountants did their job. But people are still adopting the cloud, and that story is an example, right? And so if people are still like, hey, I don't know if I trust Google Drive. AI is a whole nother beast.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think there's a timing function here, and there's an education function here that we'll talk about a little bit more around how to bridge this gap.
Well, I think there's a forcing function too. You talked a little bit about outsourcing and, pre-pandemic, like, on the accounting side, we had very few firms that were really outsourcing a, fundamental amount of their work. And
Hmm.
and then sort of as we realized that we didn't necessarily have to be in the office all the time and that our work could get done from a multitude of different places, you saw a real big push over the course of the last 5, 6 years to do some of this work offshore, right? And it wasn't
Yeah,
just that, okay, we're now excited to go offshore. It was literally, that what do they say that necessity breeds creativity. Like
yeah,
that's exactly what's happening. And so I think that the people that are uncomfortable with some of these AI tools, they're really going to be forced, not just from a competitive standpoint, but just to get the work done, right? They're either going to turn away a huge volume of work or they're going to have to tackle some of these tools, correct?
yeah. They are 100% being forced, and I think this is a little bit of a teaser into the future of these slides. But um, the education aspect is going to be huge
Ah,
for accounting advisory firms, right? It's going to be massive, and I think, yeah, another teaser alert in terms of my 5-year crystal ball thing. I think accounting firms, accounting advisory, technical accounting, IPO readiness, managed services, they're going to win in 5 years, right? Because if we get more efficient, there's a talent gap in accounting. People are retiring. You're going to have to look to accounting firms. So I think there's a good outlook.
Yeah. And I think that there's actually a nice story to be told here as well for how we attract more people to the industry. I had a conversation with a CMO, an accounting firm, at a recent event, and they were talking about how one of the things. So in our survey tool, we identify, we call them the shout outs, right? And this is where people have gone above and beyond, done great service and orientation. And she was talking about how they really like the shout outs because it not only reinforces positive service internally, but it reminds their professionals that they're doing more than just pushing commas around a page. And
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the big things that we're seeing with this, right? Is that the accounting profession, in terms of the number of degrees, bachelor's and graduate degrees, peaked at about 2016 in terms of annual, and we've been coming down ever since then, and coming down pretty significantly in the last couple of years. And so think about it from an AI standpoint, like how do you see that playing into how we can maybe more effectively show that we are impacting people's lives, not pushing commas? What do you see in that term?
I think for me, in terms of the education piece, it seems like there's just a shift in people think that this is a conservative, safe job to get into. I think the new generations want to be a little bit more strategic within a business. I also think that the what you learn in an accounting class or an accounting major is more indexed towards like, debits, credits, balance sheet,
Yeah.
income statement, and less towards how do I implement NetSuite and get from record to report with all my subledgers and then report financials and tell a story to my CFO.
Yeah.
So that there's a gap there, and I think that has to be filled. And there's a few things that we're doing on that with something called Flow Academy, which is a free thing to keep CPAs active with CP credits and learnings there. But yeah, I think this is definitely adding to the crisis of that talent gap.
So one of the other areas that I know you guys have done some research into is just the burnout piece, right? So I think
Yeah.
if we're telling this story, right, so far what we've said is that demand for accountants is going to increase at a greater than sort of industry average amount. We're losing a ton of people to retirement, which means that we're losing capability, but we're also losing that knowledge. We're replacing them with fewer people each year than we were
Mhm.
before because there's fewer on the education side. And so now that's also leading to a lot of burnout. So talk about burnout and the impact that AI can have on that.
Yeah, I think another good it's not a story, but if you think about a department store, right, Eric, like if you were to go buy someone in your family a bag 25 years ago, you could do it with a credit card, cash, and it had to be in stock. If you think about it today, it's cash, credit card, Klarna, Affirm, a gift card. They can order to made, order from a different store, ship. That's a bunch of work in the back end that accounts are doing, and they're getting more burnt out in general because we're expecting more efficiency and they haven't adopted the software or the AI to get it done.
Yeah.
So this 99% number is high, but I get it. I think it's like 43% are feeling it constantly or often. When I started working at Flowcast 8 years ago, this was part of our value prop, like made for accountants by accountants to close the books faster, more accurately, and get you home for like soccer practice. And I thought that was a joke when I came into the industry, and now I get it working with former public accountant folks and seeing our own team. So I'm not surprised by this number.
Yeah, we see it in the data that we have. We do client feedback surveys, but we also do employee feedback surveys. And we're just seeing a different relationship with work that people are having, especially when you look at Gen Y and younger. Gen Y and younger will make up about 2/3 of the workforce by the end of this decade, which is kind of right around the corner, right? We're already halfway through
Yeah.
this decade, and that their willingness to do work without meaning, their willingness to do 70 or 80 hours during a busy season, those are just not attractive, right? And they're looking for a lot of other alternatives as a part of this. And we see it in our data as well. Like the burnout rates are very real. People feel overwhelmed at work with some significance. And so as you look at this, not only does it have a real, can it have a real impact on the amount of work that somebody can get done and still maintain their sanity, but it's also, you feel burnout when engagement drops, right? You feel
Mhm.
burnout when you don't like your job. And some of the most repetitive, boring aspects of an entry or mid-level accounting professional's job are things that can really be impacted by this. Is that kind of how you look at that?
100%. Yeah. And then there's another aspect, and I hope no one is Gen Z or younger on this call, but we're having some Gen Z folks just leave after a couple years if they're burnt out in general and take time off. So I think that's a whole nother aspect to generational stuff there.
Yeah, yeah, it's that whole mindset is quite a bit different, and also it's as we're building our firms, like it's going to be on the backs of Gen Y and Gen Z, and so we have to make sure that we're aligning with what they want, and that's one of the things that I find interesting is sometimes we'll be talking to a partner group, and that partner group will largely be 50 to 60 years old, and it's hard to relate, right? It's what they expected from work and what they wanted from work is so radically different than somebody that's 25 and entering the workforce, or 23 and a couple years into the workforce. And so we have to be able to really understand that has changed in a meaningful way and be able to change along with it.
Totally, totally. Yep.
So let's go into this, right? This is some other data that I thought was interesting. New accountants rank work-life balance as their top priority when choosing an employer. 74% of Gen Z and millennials believe Gen I will impact how they work within a year. That's from a Deloitte study. 40% of the intent to stay is around that engagement, which I just kind of talked through that component as well. Retention is a killer. When you look at accounting professionals that have built up relationships with clients that have not only the knowledge that you talked about earlier, but also have that client knowledge, right? And this is one of the areas that I think is going to be the hardest to really um, replace with the AI tools, which is this ability to contextualize, to understand that, okay, yeah, Roshan is leading this organization. He's my key contact on this organization, but he also is has a major life event that's coming up, right? That's a part of this. And so how do I help Roshan think through the collective, um, and not just one entity or not just one practice area as a part of that? I think there's some really amazing things that we can do there. And if we're opening up that time, for that more meaningful work, I think that's the side of it that we care about. So my question to you on this one is, when you see this, have you seen examples of this even already?
Um, I think what's interesting about this is if you think about Gen Z and the young, the younger folks coming out of college today, they actually do on the flip side of the coin bring a lot of AI knowledge and how to use LLMs and deeper into the accounting function. And so I think there's this almost model of CFOs and controllers actually trusting these staff accountants that are bringing new strategies. And as soon as you enable those folks to implement those sorts of systems, I actually do see a situation where retention kind of scales and that person becomes more of a strategic reviewer of work than preparer of work.
Yeah.
And so part of that also comes with hiring accounting firms, hiring managed services firms, working in a more efficient way, allowing yourself as an accountant to not let AI feel like it's going to take your job, but upskill you in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
There could be something said on the flip side of the coin about retention there, and how AI is leveraged by kind of the younger generations.
Well, and I know that this is not what I had on the slide, but I was actually interviewing somebody for a position at Clearly Rated the other day, young, fairly fresh out of college. And you get to that point in the interview where you turn the tables and you say, okay, do you have any questions for me? And it was the first time that I'd gotten this, like, what are you doing to leverage AI to help people accelerate their careers, was the question. And this was a real A player. This is probably my favorite person in the hiring process that we talked to. And it was clear like their biggest judgment about whether working here or somewhere else had a lot to do with what we could promise them in terms of acceleration on their understanding and utilization of these tools. What do you think about it from an attraction standpoint? Is that was that novel, or do you think we're going to see more of that?
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't talked to anyone that's asked that sort of question, but that makes a ton of sense. And I think this ties into a lot of the slush that we're about to talk about around AI and what's out there and the education aspect. But yeah, a company's willingness to be AI forward is definitely going to be something that attracts younger talent.
Yeah, we see this a lot. Accounting firms utilizing their client experience scores and the positive scores and some of the things the
Mhm.
client say about them to be appealing to attracting new professionals into the firm. And I suspect that this is going to be that next thing, right? Because if you think about it, if I'm, if you or I were mentoring somebody that was new to this industry, I 100% would be telling them, look, you want to understand, how the firm does, how they've done with their clients, but you also want to understand, like, buy, don't sell, understand what those first few years look like for you. And, my advice is always don't take the highest paying job, take the job that puts you in the best place to get the next job that you want, right?
Yeah,
And if somebody's really going to be sort of AI forward, that's going to matter a lot, right? And in fact, we
yeah,
kind of laid this out a little bit. Traditional versus AI forward accounting firms, right? When you look at retention, you're going to have improved retention. You've got the ability to kind of de-stress things. You've got the job satisfaction impact, the work-life balance impact that we know is so important. But that last one is kind of what I'm talking about, which is that career development. Like you can promise a more accelerated career development if you're forward thinking on these tools than otherwise. Is that kind of your take as well?
100%. And it feels like AI is actually a bigger paradigm shift for accounting firms than it is for the end clients and the accountants at the specific function, like an accounting manager or controller. Because the reality is there are a ton of accounting firms out there, right? You have Big Four, you have more of the boutique ones. They serve different segments. They specialize in different things, whether it's managed services or accounting advisory or IPO readiness. It feels like AI is a paradigm shift that you can kind of grab, and it can put you above a lot of the others, because this is another teaser to the rest of this. But like the CFO is asking an accounting person at their on their team to go and adopt AI solutions, like who more to trust than the accounting advisory firm or the accounting firm?
Yeah.
So folks that are getting really good at this and allowing for it within their firm and allowing for younger folks that are more AI forward to come in, I think will win.
Yeah, I talk a lot about, as an accounting firm, the value above billable, right? And
Yeah.
that's this type of thing. When you can help somebody navigate how they should be thinking about AI, you're adding value beyond what you're billing, and that's really the key to building that long-term loyalty. We do have a couple of questions. You actually had read one of them from the audience, but talk a little bit about the slush in the market and breaking the signal from the noise was a question that just came in from our audience. How would you answer that?
Yeah, so I think a couple of you guys at Clearly Rated are from the Bay Area, and you've driven across the Bay Bridge and seen the 50 billboards that all say agentic AI and powered by AI and all that type of stuff. And so there's more slush here because of social media and LinkedIn popping off and all these billboards around AI than any other big shift in the SaaS market or any other market. And so like it's extremely difficult to sift through the buzzwords, figure out what's actually real, what I want to adopt today, and then can't really centralize or drive business value from and churn off later on. And then so the two big things to think about, I think, for accounting firms and end clients of accounting firms is the AI that I'm deploying auditable? And does that company, if I'm deploying a product, have ISO 42001? Right? Like if you're thinking about non-deterministic versus deterministic and hallucinations, non-deterministic and hallucinations don't work for 95% of accounting because you're dealing with calculations. And if you come up with a different number every time, how is that auditable?
Yeah.
That's like the number one thing that should be asked. And two is ISO 42001 is the responsible development of AI and AI code as a software vendor. So if you don't have that and you're not compliant with the, with protecting finance data and developing responsible AI. I think that's also a mess down the line, especially for accounting firms servicing public companies.
Yeah.
So although AI is extremely important to fill this talent gap today, I think taking the time to be intentional to also evaluate companies that have been intentional to service this sort of thing is extremely important. And again, the education aspect there, like when I talk to CFOs and controllers, there's a huge knowledge gap on what AI is, right? Like some people are just still summarizing emails in LLMs. Some people are like, hey, let me automate an end-to-end accounting workflow, like a billing accrual by pulling from Coupa and NetSuite, manipulating the data, getting the outcome, having human in the loop, and then posting into NetSuite. Like
Yeah.
there's that's totally two different extremes. And so I think over the next 2, 3 years, I don't think people are behind here. But I think we need to be intentional before rushing into it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great advice. We got one more question from the audience on this. We've been rolling out new AI tools. We're struggling to get adoption. Any advice for getting these tools to get used more, especially by our senior partners and professionals?
Interesting. From a from a client perspective, is that more
I
from
think
a
what they're
accounting
talking
firm?
about, yeah, I think they're talking about from the accounting firm perspective, getting, specifically their older partners to engage in some of these tools for productivity.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that I don't know if anyone has cracked the code on, because it's I think there's naturally going to be that distribution of folks that are more forward on it. For example, I don't want to make this a selling thing, but for Flowcast, the AI that we're deploying, we're spending some time in something called an immersive onboarding program where we teach our customers how to build agents within Flowcast, and that takes around 5 to 6 hours in a workshop. And we're clearly seeing a distribution of folks that are maybe younger, or more AI forward in general that are finishing that and doing an extremely good job versus the older generation that potentially just has been doing it in their ways for a long time and just doesn't care to do it.
Yeah.
So that's a tough question to answer. I think from the client perspective, what I can answer is deploying AI functionality and platforms that you're already using is a much easier way to adopt than deploying point solutions that are brand new, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're already entrenched in it. It's part of the work, and it's more of like a supplemental um, than a totally net new.
Yeah, I also think that, especially for marketers and biz developers on the call, if you can identify a couple people that are, are early adopters, turning them loose, and having them share how they're using it with the rest of the firm, I've seen that work a little bit better. And then, let's not boil the ocean, right? Let's start
Yeah,
with a couple of things that can add real value, because like anything, what you want is you want your partners coming and saying, hey, this was great. Are there other things that we could be doing, right? As opposed to feeling like they're being forced to adopt that. So
100%.
let's keep moving, and we can talk now about utilizing the AI tools and the expectations that we see. And this is a lot of text on the slide, so don't feel like you got to read it. But what we hear from our research with clients is that there's certainly uncertainty, but that there is already pretty significant adoption with the clients of accounting firms. So the professionals that are working but not with firms, that adoption is pretty high. When we turn and we ask, like, what do you expect to have happen, and how do you expect it to impact how you work with your primary accounting firm? You could see here that over half of people expect it to impact really any one of these attributes, but you're seeing it specifically around speed, responsiveness, quality. This gets back, Roshan, the quality piece makes me think of what you're saying there with the auditable, and you just cannot have a single hallucination in
Hmm.
in a financial workflow, right? It has to be, it can't be that it works 99% of the time. It's got to be 100%, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah, this is interesting data. I'm curious around the cost of services though, right? Like again, there's a lot of accounting firms out there. If you can implement technology and processes that are AI driven for your clients and de-risk and be able to handle more clients at a time, curious how that number changes over time.
I think so too. And depending on how you want that data to look, right? I can torture that data one of two ways. The headline could be over half of people don't expect AI to drop, or nearly half of people expect AI to reduce the costs of working with their primary accounting firm. Um,
Yeah.
what I think is happening to all of us, and accounting is certainly a part of this, is like we're being asked to quantify the value that we're adding in a more meaningful way, right? This sort of black box of, hey, you told me it costs this much, and now it costs this much. I think that starts to go away with some of these AI tools, and and the ability and the expectation that we're going to do everything a little bit more efficiently. So
Yeah.
I'm willing to pay a premium, but it better be very clear to me the value that you're adding for that premium. Um, Otherwise, I am going to look and try to solve it somewhere else.
Yeah, man, this is as we're walking through this, I'm thinking more about this. Like I think this is such a huge opportunity for marketers and biz dev folks at accounting advisory and just accounting firms in general. Um, I think one of the biggest issues that we would deal with or challenges that we're dealing with now as we're selling our AI products to CFOs and controllers is when you're dealing with LLMs and AI and there's this whole consumption aspect to it of the LLM as we're running the data every single time, right? And if you're selling to a salesperson or RevOps person, they understand that consumption aspect and the impact on costs.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge, again, knowledge gap and education piece where marketers and biz dev folks of accounting firms can really drive content. Also using AI to build that content that we'll
Yeah.
talk to later on educating, like, hey, how do I deal with a CFO that's going to, is going to value predictability in pricing? How should a CFO be thinking about consumption pricing? How does that look within their actual accounting? There's so much education stuff that I think has to be done, and the accounting firms that do it quickly and today are going to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really continues to push us to value-based pricing, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to time and expense pricing, because it's just not the right metric anymore. It probably hasn't been for quite some time, and I know a lot of firms have already kind of moved that direction, but it's an important distinction. We're going to see it in accounting, we'll see it in law. Most of the professional services I think are going to face that in one way or another. So we talked a little bit on the prep call about how these AI tools can either dehumanize the experience for clients, or they can kind of rehumanize the experience for clients. And I've got a perspective on this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this first.
I like the slide. It's like Terminator.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
actually the usually the GIF that I use on this is a Terminator reanimation.
that's what a lot of the accounting industry thinks of AI,
Yeah,
probably.
that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I can talk a little bit about it from the sales aspect. I was actually on a panel in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and the moderator asked me if I was for or against the AI sales development representative. So for the biz dev folks, you guys know what that is, but reaching out to CFOs from our aspect to sell, Flowcast as a product. Like my inbox is blowing up now with AI SDRs, and my crystal ball prediction is in 2-3 years that'll probably all be gone
Yeah,
because we're going to crave the human aspect. Again, a reason why I think accounting firms are going to win in this next 5 years when it comes to accounting. You're going to have someone at an accounting firm that you trust that can educate you properly on AI, make sure that it's AI that's compliant, and you want to get away from all this robotic stuff. So
yeah.
I think it's actually an opportunity for humanization.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that, with the productivity, what I encourage people to do is like, look, you roll something out that makes you 20% more productive, makes your partners 20% more productive. Take a third of that time and commit to putting that back to the relationships. Because what we see in the accounting industry is we do a really good job with our biggest relationships at staying close, being proactive, knowing their needs. But 90% of clients of accounting firms are feeling like their firms are largely reactive, not proactive. That they're largely, focused on the immediate need or the immediate place in there, but they're not very strategic in their guidance. And this is an opportunity, right? As we leverage these tools, it's easier to be proactive. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute too, right? Identifying opportunities, utilizing some of these tools. It's also, you also should be able to create more time to do some of these things, right? Which is going to open new opportunities and create new structure there as well. So, I think that that's exactly kind of what we see on this as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I think an accounting firm that's positioning themselves as AI forward, but then also adheres and aligns to the psychology of an accountant, which is risk averse and potentially early on against AI.
Yeah.
I think every marketer and biz dev person in an accounting firm should race towards these are the top 10 pitfalls around what you should be sifting out when it comes to AI.
Yeah.
And aligning with that psychology is going to be important as well.
Well, and I think that you bring up a really interesting point, which is that, and I have found that we all do this in our own roles, right? We have a handful of things that we really enjoy, that we're quite good with, and given a task list of 5 things, if we can choose that thing that we're most comfortable with to do it all the time, we're going to continue to do it. And so that is, I think, a risk as you bring in some of these AI tools and some of these things. And now I am free to pick, I get, let's say, an hour a day back. How am I going to use that hour? And we have to really get our professionals to push against maybe their natural tendency, which is like, okay, I'm going to digest more technical information. I'm gonna go in and tweak how we respond to this, which they maybe feel really good at and really comfortable with, and push out of that comfort zone to I'm gonna call 3 clients and
Mhm.
set up coffee next week, right? That's what we really want them to do with at least some of that time.
100%. Yeah. Or
So
beers.
so yeah, exactly. This is so there's kind of the AI for the firm, right? But there's also this AI for clients, and I think it's interesting because we think about it a lot of times as like, okay, the client experience, like the clients want us to do all of this stuff, and so yeah, I see using AI tools to get more productive and everything like that. But our research would show, and I would love your kind of take on this as well, that actually clients respond well to being able to do some things on their own, right? And
Hmm.
able to um, you know dive a little bit deeper and self-select a little bit. So what's kind of your take on this in terms of how we leverage AI tools internally for productivity versus turning some of these AI tools externally for our clients to utilize?
Yeah, I think I guess the analogy there is like buy versus build, right? Like, am I going to build applied AI productivity type things internally, or am I going to evaluate externally to make my function more efficient? We're seeing from the accounting space in general, just anecdotally, that they are more inclined to look to their accounting firms or their managed services firms or vendors to implement AI strategies and processes and technology. But I think that potentially could change because there's this world of vibe coding and all that stuff, and the barrier to entry to build more efficient things. And there's all social media is talking about different processes that you can automate with just GPT and things like that that are more support function work. But I think from our perspective, yeah, we've seen a huge jump in demand for our top of funnel as a vendor that's AI first from accounting functions.
Yeah. I think the research that we've done into like buyers of accounting services and existing clients indicates that really what they want is they want a friction-free experience. And oftentimes that means that they're utilizing software and some of these tools to be able to do it AI and otherwise. But they also want, if you think about that as like, a freeway that they
Hmm.
can kind of go as fast as they want, whenever they want, wherever they want, and within certain things that they need to get done. They also want a lot of exit ramps, and those exit ramps are where they're getting the context, they're getting the coaching, they're getting the advice, they're getting the answers that they need. And so a blend of AI and human out those exit ramps makes a big
Hmm.
difference. And that's kind of the best case study that we've seen on it so far.
100%.
So let's talk case study. I thought you had an interesting example of a firm that's leveraging some of these tools with their clients. Talk a little bit about what we can learn from that.
Yeah, I can actually give two case studies. One is like on a pitfall, dangerous case study, and one is something that's proven for value. I'll start with the value one. So we have an accounting advisory firm that we work with very closely that implements Flowcast and suggests Flowcast, but is also obviously non-biased. I know a lot of accounting advisory firms have to be non-biased and managed services firms, but there's also some that implement specific technology. Um, There was a company in the enterprise for us that obviously much larger that was outsourcing their cash posting process to a shared service center in India. And had come to this accounting advisory firm that we work with around, hey, what are some processes that we can look to automate with AI? How can you guys come in, develop a matrix to understand complex versus simple processes, time intensive versus non-time intensive? Cash posting was one of those. They were spending $60,000 to outsource this process per year on cash posting, and they actually implemented Flowcasts in our agentic framework in our product to completely eliminate that. That process happens in 7 seconds now, where they can run it, and this accounting advisory firm actually makes that run for them. So no one at the end customer on the accounting team is even touching it.
Yeah.
It's just an accounting advisory firm or accounting firm that's going in, uploading the documents for the cash posting, and it runs the agent, and then it posts the journal entry to NetSuite in 7 seconds. So that was a huge value add
That's
for that
great.
customer. I think that's doing the work. Not many companies are doing that. We took our time over the last 2 years to build it intentionally, to do it in an auditable way. There's a lot of companies out there that I think is a huge pitfall, and a lot of the accounting firms can talk a little bit more about this, but a lot of the point solutions like Y Combinator type early stage companies are trying to rush to do this type of stuff, right? Because it's a huge opportunity. But a lot of it is support function type LLM wrapper type stuff. There's a company out there that, for example, I heard from a customer of ours that was selling this product that is effectively a wrapper around GPT-4, and they're asking for accounting guidance for a specific ASC whatever number. And there's a way to filter within it to a specific Big Four guidance. So talk to me about this guidance from EY, right? That's really cool. It demos really well. It's slick. But if you type that in 3 or 4 times, it's a different answer all 3 or 4 times. So how can you depend on something like that? So the pitfalls are so much more important from a case study perspective, I think,
Yeah.
right now than the actual like value add. And I think again, accounting firms can stomp on that.
Yeah, this is one of the places where the natural caution that accounting firms have is probably pretty well placed, right? Because there's a
Yeah.
lot of, it's like a pretty awesome road that we're on, but steep cliffs on either side, right?
Yeah.
And you get a little bit off of center there, bad things can happen. So I think that that's great. So I want to take some questions from our audience because we've had a couple of these that have you know jumped up on this. And do you see it as an opportunity or a threat for accounting firms to help clients understand how to effectively leverage these AI tools?
I actually see it as a huge opportunity. Yeah, if you think about it as a way, if I guess the traditional thought would be, hey, if we're if we're helping clients implement this, why do they need us?
Yeah,
I actually think I would take the flip side of that, in that again, that the education matters more than anything, the upskilling matters more than anything.
yeah,
My sense now is that the accountant is going to go from someone that's preparing work to reviewing work, and someone that is going to be just dangerous enough in accounting to understand how to build processes, but is more deeply indexed towards having the ability to deploy agents and automate processes. Ramp is a good example of a company that's doing this already, and they're just a great company. So I think a lot of people will follow. But they have a financial efficiency person that's actually owning all technology and financial systems in the back office. And then how do I make that a platform? How do I not have point solutions? And how do I deploy AI on top of it to automate end-to-end things? I think what's going to happen, my 5-year hot take prediction going back to it, is the accountants that know how to do that type of work are going to win. The
yeah,
rest of the accountants that don't know how to do that type of work are going to be flushed out over time as they retire. And those accountants then are going to move into being the talent pipeline for accounting firms.
interesting.
And maybe the accounting function as you're starting a company can be much more lean with one strategic CFO and FP&A person, and then the accounting firms manage all the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting take, and I like kind of how you're thinking about it here. I view it as the opportunity as well. I mean, the reality is that your clients are gonna like the vast majority of everybody in the world of business is going to be trying to unlock value within these tools. And the idea, you know, you can either be their guide in that, and participate and create value that you can capture a portion of that value from, or you can let somebody else do it. But the idea that if you don't show them, they won't, they'll just keep it status quo. I just don't see that as a realistic hypothesis.
Yeah, the real thing is that the board, C staff, and if you're owned by private equity or venture capital, they are pushing this down heavily on their C staff to go implement these solutions. And if an accounting firm is not forward on this thing, I think they'll move on to another one because who else to trust? Like,
Yeah.
as a controller, who else do you trust as an accounting firm, right? You don't trust a vendor. So,
Exactly, exactly. So let's now turn to kind of we pulled together kind of 5 opportunities for the individuals on this call to be better at their job, be more productive, create opportunities that maybe they couldn't have created otherwise. And this was the first one that you kind of brought up, which was this account-based marketing at scale. And I love the whole concept of ABM, right?
mhm.
And for those that don't know, I think most will, but this is the concept that you are, instead of having everything sort of look the same and be across this sort of mass marketing kind of piece, what you're doing is you're picking really specific high value opportunities and you're going very, very deep with them to really source them with the right information at the right time. And it's a much more collaborative sort of marketing and sales dance that happens as we're leading them through a prospect journey. So talk a little bit about ABM at scale. How does some of these AI tools impact that?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from the lens of how we're doing it, and I think it reflects nicely for accounting firms as well, biz dev, CX, the marketing folks, and I can probably send something to you at the end of this that can align more closer to the accounting firms specifically. But for accounting firms, right, like from an ABM perspective, you want to know who is in a CFO position now that has worked with us in the past, who is an IPO or a future IPO company who's acquired by private equity and is acquisitive and has a bunch of different entities. They might need specific accounting guidance. Um, there's all sorts of intent signals and other CRM data and things like that, and clearly rated type data that you guys are working with. And there's vendors out there like Clay, for example, that we use that integrate with all of these things, use it as metadata, and allow you to create campaigns and personalize things through AI and natural language, where a lot of that top of funnel work is automated. And I mean, we're sending, 50 different campaigns, even though our ICP is a CFO
Yeah.
based on all this intent data. So there's a bunch of different vendors out there. Clay is an incredible one. I think it works really nicely for accounting firms as well. But yeah.
I love that. And I think that that is ultimately the future, right? What, as a buyer, what we want is we want information that is valuable to us, even if we're not quite ready to buy at that point, right? And your ability to generate that at scale has always been limited to the amount of effort it takes to create 80 versions of this same, general value proposition. And that now is going down almost to zero, right?
Yep.
So talk about Jasper. I honestly spent a little time looking at Jasper. I was not familiar with them at all until you kind of brought that along. So what is Jasper? What does it do? And how can we use it as a marketer?
Yeah, so for us at Flowcast, the problem statement was we have all kinds of content. It's stored in one place, right? We have blog posts, we have case studies, we have webinars, we have on-demand demos of Flowcast, all the assets that we like to send externally to our CFOs and controllers as a vendor. That stuff has to change, right? There's like what do you call it? What is it? Controls, version control, right? Version
Yep.
control issues.
Yep.
Those things aren't caught in time. A product marketer can, let's say, only put out, 5 things a month. We have product marketers building blog posts, landing pages, social media campaigns, decks at a ridiculous clip now. Because at Jasper, you can just kind of work through a canvas and type in natural language how you want to build a specific asset. And those assets are built through AI. So this is just one that I wanted to target and talk through because I think it's really important for marketers of accounting firms to build better assets, specifically on what we talked about earlier, which is the education of AI and pitfalls and stuff like that. So this is a tool that can be used to spin up that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and it allows to the dissecting of like this webinar right here, right? This could be 3 blog posts and 5 videos that we post to social media, and all from this. But in the past, that would take somebody a few hours to go through, clip those, get those ready, and you can do that much quicker now with a tool like Jasper as well. This one I wanted to kind of start this piece of it as well, and this is kind of how we look through the questions about how we automate repetitive workflows, right? How often do I do this? How readily available is information? Are there definable rules that I can give, right, so that I can automate this and then run it every time? I'll just give an example. Call prep, right? That's a perfect one. We have basically the same questions that we want to make sure that our SDRs and our sales team has the right information about the individuals we're going to be meeting with and the organization that we're going to be meeting with. And so, we've run a script that we run on GPT-5 in agent mode. It takes about 10 minutes for it to run, and it provides a really detailed summary with links out on the things that we should know going into a call as a part of it. What do you think of this list? What should we be doing different? I think you have more expertise than I do on this. This is a starting point, but it's always evolving.
I like this list a lot for internal. I would use this internally as well. And transparently, I'm probably better at selling AI to a customer than using AI myself.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect anecdote around how important the education is for you to use it in your productivity. I think from my perspective, from an accounting firm, if they are looking to educate the market, I think one of the biggest things that CFOs and CISOs and CTOs are dealing with today is how do I derive business value, and how do I build a framework for how I derive business value from AI solutions, and these are the questions that you should be asking, right? Like, how do you define the vision? How do you conduct an AI fit assessment? How do you build the business case? How do you develop a pilot plan? All that sort of things are extremely important. So that's another opportunity, I think, for accounting firms to build out those frameworks. What are the repetitive things? What are the time-consuming things? And things for CFOs to just be thinking about as they're evaluating services and technology.
Yeah, absolutely. This one is, I think, a key one. We have a perspective on this as well. One of the transformative things that we have added into our survey tools that has literally gone. We landed somebody, Roshan, you'll appreciate this. We landed somebody the other day that we've been doing their employee surveys for almost a decade, and they added in the client surveys, and it was because they didn't realize that we could actually help them resolve kind of their cross-selling and creation of cross-selling opportunities. And by utilizing it, to think of it as less of a report card and more of an ability to generate like what clients have experienced now and what they need in the future, opened the door in a pretty transformative way. And we're just scratching the surface, right? The reality is that long term, what we're going to see, and we're seeing some people do this with a variety of tools as well. You're taking intent data from clients and what they're telling you they're interested in, but you're also taking, the data from your CRM. You're taking conversations, the emails. You're identifying, hey, this person hasn't responded to us in the last 2 emails that we've sent. Like maybe that's a concern, right? You're starting to really utilize these to understand a moment of need or a moment of truth, right? A point in time where they might look elsewhere if you're not actually right there to help them with that. So talk a little bit about kind of how you see this.
Yeah, we use technology like Gainsight and things like this for this as well. I think Clearly Rate is a perfect technology for something like this around survey data and potential churn and all that type of stuff. We actually built something internally as well that integrates with Slack, where, like, for example, an accounting firm would take clearly rated data and then Gong transcripts from conversations with a customer or a client, and then like you can, as an account owner or biz dev person, type into Slack and gain insights from that metadata. We use that a lot with Gong transcripts, all of our intent data platforms, Clay, our CRM. So you can kind of get like account health, talk to me about the last call. What were some indications that they could potentially be looking at another system, or what products potentially based on this intent data could they potentially use? So that's kind of I guess the path from a V1 to V2 of building this out.
Yeah, and I just think about it even in our own use case, because we're utilizing Gong and all of these transcription services And the reality is that they provide a lot of insight on an individual call. But what you're saying is like you could really kind of take the collective of calls there too, right? You can overlay that next umbrella that I think is pretty critical as well.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into the last one that we have, which is this meeting to marketing factory. I thought that this was really interesting. We have a couple of our professionals that are doing some of this here, but talk a little bit about like your experience with this.
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit with the Jasper piece. I think there's ways to do this with simple LLMs too for folks that don't want to spend their time evaluating and purchasing something like that. What we do is like we have two or three thought leaders. Sorry, I put a quotes on there. Thought leaders uh, at our company, right? Like our CEO is a domain guy. He came from accounting, and he just riffs with our marketing team in a Zoom that's recorded on this whole what I've talked about, right? Talent gap,
Yeah.
guidance of counting is going up, auditability, AI pitfalls, all those sorts of things. And then you can just leverage an LLM to take that recording and create blog posts, create LinkedIn posts, articles, all that one pager type stuff, case studies, quotes. So I think that's like probably the most simple, fundamental way to use AI today without barriers to entry that I think folks on this webinar can leverage.
Yeah, my peer on the Client Savvy product that we have, the founder there utilized this just the other day. It's literally was on a client call, and they were specifically dealing with a challenge related to their CX program. And so he went through a similar kind of deal. He's been doing this for 20 years, and so he went through and was able to really riff on this, give some examples, give some things, some pitfalls, things to avoid, and literally just took that transcript, said, look, make this generic so that it's not client specific, and put this into a blog post, and then put it into an internal training document that's a little bit more robust, and within just a few kind of directions, we had some content externally, we had some training materials internally, and so
Yeah.
I'm excited to do more of this. I've not done much of it, but we're starting to do it. I think it's a amazing tool for marketers.
Yeah, 100%. And this actually wraps this in a bow really nicely. So I think the theme from this is it's so easy to build technology that's AI forward to sell to a CFO or a controller. There's so little in terms of the education,
Yeah.
and accounting firms can drive a lot of that. And so going back to that last slide, like if you instead of like our CEO, if there's a partner at your firm that's really forward on this stuff, that understands this stuff, I would just have a weekly meeting with them to just talk through this stuff and riff without any sort of script or theme. And as a marketer or a CX person at an accounting firm, I can build so much content around education for this. And the more education that you post as an accounting firm, I think the more you win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of these internal meetings. We have a meeting where we talk through like success stories, like launch success stories. Like that should be turned into, a training library that gets updated and gets added to that on a regular basis. And it should be turned into potential case studies. There's a whole bunch of things that come out of that, that if we're recording those, we've got the data, right? We're creating data with these recordings and with these CRMs, and now we have the opportunity to mine that data. It looks like we do have one question. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in. If we don't get to them, I do want to be cognizant of time, but we do have at least one more question that we can get to, that's in the queue right now, which is how do you work around the AI effect on content? Does it start to feel generic and stale? And I've seen this a little bit too, or read a little bit about this too. You can kind of tell some of the AI generated content with some tells that it has, I guess. What are you seeing in that regard, Roshan?
Yeah, I think one is that's a totally fair concern, and that goes back to the humanization aspect. One thing that we do for that is we actually train it to speak in our CEO's tone, and that's
Yeah.
just kind of the standard tone for Flowcast in general. That could work. It could get you 80% of the way there, but I think similar to AI product solving for the accounting function, you need a human in the loop. And so if you want to leverage AI to just build kind of frameworks or skeletons of specific content and have a content person still write it, I think that kind of potentially could solve for that as well.
Yeah, I think look, you need either you need a human involvement somewhere along the line, right? If you're just spitting out content through these LLMs, then it's just the same way as if you did content in any other kind of farm, right? It's gonna lack your voice. It's gonna lack the nuance that actually makes it really sing. So they can get you 80, 85, maybe even 90% of the way there, depending on how you train it and things like that. But you're always going to have to add that human element, and you should add that human element. In a rarity, we're ending right on time. It is 11 Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern. I wanted to thank Roshan. Thank you for being here, sharing your expertise. I wanted to thank our audience. Again, this will be made available, the slides and the recording. And thank you so much for the good questions as we went through and the engagement. Roshan, any last parting wisdom for the group?
No, that's it. I appreciate you guys having me, and I'm very excited for the future of accounting firms in general.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.